Hi, I'm Demi, and I'm currently developing a video game where you descend into a dungeon to hunt monsters and extract their resources. I initially started this project as practice to make a combat system, but I enjoyed it so much that I felt it would be a waste not to put this in a completed project. As a result, my game Eldritch Knights was born. If you take a look at any of the previous devlogs, you would notice one glaring issue. There were only two monsters to fight in the game that's all about fighting and hunting monsters. I was well aware of this, but I put it on the side to focus on many other aspects of the game, like the save systems, menus, and much more. However, I could not put this off for much longer, so I set out to bring a couple of my ideas to life. So, I initially was going to show you how this works with like a script. I got the script somewhere on my phone, but I've been enjoying the more casual me talking into the camera and giving you the description of whatever I'm doing. So I think I'll do that for this. So essentially, how do my enemies in my video game work, or rather how are they constructed? So if you remember from one of my previous devlogs, I mentioned how Godot favors composition over inheritance. And you may already know what that means, but if you don't need to worry about it. Essentially what it means is when you make an element in your game, instead of having it inherit different attributes that would make it work, you make different parts that do different things and you have them composite the object you're making. So one component for one problem. And that is exactly how my enemies are made in game. So if we take a look at an enemy, just the basic enemy, you see so many different things. You can see different raycasts, you can see UI elements, you can see the enemy sprite itself. Every single one of those things is its own component and it's doing its own thing. So let's take a look at the enemy sprite. The enemy sprite exists, and that is what you would see. We have an animation player which handles various animations, like for example we can have the enemy move, we can have it attack also, or rather get hit. Then we can have it attack. So the animation player handles playing the animations for the enemy sprite. We have a hitbox, we have a hurt box, we have a bunch of AI detectors that just help the enemy function. We got a few other things that manage stuff like the damage numbers, the damage it takes, the attack damage it deals out, and so much more. And as the game grows, we are going to expand on this and add so much more stuff. I even have some debug items like a label that I use to find out what state the enemy is in, and much more can be done. So it's very useful to use composition over inheritance in Godot, because mainly because of like the scalability. Right now initially the enemy never started out like this. It only had a few things, and I kept adding and adding and adding, and it just kept growing and becoming more complex. Oh, that's my alarm. I'm becoming more complex, and that just comes together to just make this what it is right now. So that was just a quick overview of how it works. If I go in depth on every single bit of composition that this enemy has, it would or rather my enemies have, because they all inherit from this template I'm showing you. It will take forever. So just have that in mind. The enemy is just a bunch of components, each doing its own function and coming together to make the enemy work. Just think of it like you as a human being. You have your eyes, you have your nose, you have your mouth, and your skin, and all your 5 senses. They each do completely different things, but you need all of them to function. The same idea here. So now that we've gone through that, let's look at each enemy individually. So this enemy right now you see on the screen, minding its business, patrolling around looking for the player, is the first enemy I made. We're just gonna call him the Green Goblin right now. Oh, that's funny. We're just call them goblins or green goblins. So they were essentially, I think maybe I should read what I have in my script. That because I described my idea and thought process for the enemies in my script. So I'm just gonna read from my script. It's on my phone. So this is the OG enemy. It was the first one I created, and every other enemy currently inherits its composition from this one. So essentially what that means is this was the first enemy I made, and I used that to model a template that I just copy and paste into my newer enemies, because they all use like the same components. I just changed the values in each of them so they function a little differently, but still the same nonetheless. So yeah, this was the very first one I made. The idea behind these are like they're very small and weak, but in large groups they can easily overwhelm the player. So if you have like 3 or 4 or 5 of them walking around, that could be a little difficult to manage. So I just wanted them to be like for the enemies where it's just like they're easy to kill, but when there's a lot of them you gotta plan your approach. So these are, since this is a game about hunting monsters, these are supposed to be like a beginner monster. Like these are monsters that anyone who's new to the game can easily beat up, but they still provide some level of challenge when they're in high numbers. This enemy doesn't do much. Its behavior is simple. Let's come down from the ledge right now. I just implemented what's it called, one-way platform, so let's make use of that. So so we come down. All he does is he attacks, chases you, and then when you get close he attacks. He doesn't do much. This guy is as simple as they come. So yeah, that is the Green Goblin, or the Goblin. So the next enemy on the list is the Red Goblin. If you take a look at the Red Goblin, it is very similar to the Green Goblin. And the difference being, in case you haven't noticed, is just their colors are different. One's red, one's green. And they're the same sprite. That's why they look very identical. I just used a shader to change the colors of an individual pixel, an individual color rather. So essentially what the code in the shader is doing is it's looking for every instance of green in the various pixels in the sprite, and then it turns them red. So we essentially reuse the old sprite to make a new enemy. Just a good way to save on your resources. So yeah, this is the Red Goblin. I'm gonna read my script and we're gonna see what I wrote in there. Whoa, let's see. Sorry, a text came in and I got distracted a bit. So yeah, I spoke about the shader already, and yeah, so this is just the Red Goblin. It does the same thing as the green. It just moves around looking for the player. However, these guys deal more damage and are more resistant to damage. So essentially just think of it as an enhanced goblin. So I'm just gonna put my mic down. So if we go down, he does exactly the same thing the Red Goblin does, but he has more health, can take more of a beating and a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, that is the Red Goblin. Fairly similar to the green, just deals more damage and can last longer. So the next enemy on the list is the shroom enemy. Now you probably, there's no shader being used here, but I have an idea for one, but I haven't implemented that yet. But essentially this is a completely different enemy with a different sprite, and that comes with different behaviors. So this one, let's see what I have in my script. So this enemy is one, I like to call it trap enemy. Yes, it's designed to be a trap enemy. They are meant to interrupt the player and set traps that force the player to think about new decisions during combat. This enemy runs towards the player and okay, okay, cool. I got the idea. So as I said in the script, this is a trap enemy. It's designed to force the player to think outside just spamming attacks on the battlefield. So what this guy does is very interesting. So I'm just gonna put down my mic real quick. So let's go down and greet the shroom. It runs up to you and then it releases some poison clouds. Well, that's what that is supposed to be. And then the longer you stand in it, the more damage you take. And then once the I guess it's a timer I'm using, but after a little bit of time it dies. So it just essentially sets the trap, and then you have to maneuver around that without losing damage during combat. And on its own it seems very easy to avoid, but when there are enemies all over, I think that would be a very interesting thing to take care of. They're also fairly squishy, so they die easily. So if you spot them from afar, you can aim your projectile and kill them real quickly. So that would be interesting in a combat scenario, I think. So that was the thought process behind this enemy. So yeah, fairly simple. The shroom enemy doesn't do much except just set traps. For this enemy, I'm just gonna read straight from my script. That would probably save a bit of time instead of me, freestyling it. So, this is a slime. In the design of my combat system, I have 10 damage types. Yeah, I have a couple damage types and various skills and weapons that deal different types of damage. For example, the player's weapon deals physical damage and the fireball skill deals fire damage. With this design implementation, it makes sense to have enemies who are weak or immune to certain damage types. Although I have enemies that are weak to certain damage types, the only enemy that is immune to one is the slime. I designed this enemy to actually test how well this idea will translate in-game during playtests. It forces the player to take note of the weapons and skills they have equipped and deal with the enemy's strengths and weaknesses. So, as I said, there are multiple damage types in the game. Physical, fire, lightning, ice, just a bunch of 10. 10 is the number, there are 10 of them. And I designed my game around each weapon skill will do a different damage type, just to provide some level of variety and also have like a basis for builds and a bunch of other stuff. So it's been going well, and I realized that while I've implemented some way to have enemies weak to certain damage types, I didn't have an enemy that was immune to one. So the slime was like a good test. So the slime is immune to physical damage. So essentially any weapon or attack that uses physical damage cannot harm the slime. So you have to think outside the box. So we can do a demonstration here. Let me just put down my mic. I hope debug is enabled in the game. So if we, I have debug open. So let's equip the fireball skill real quick. So yeah, this is our enemy. It can chase us. It can also damage us. The usual. But yeah, it's immune. You can still stun it, but it will not take any damage. You can that was the thought process I had. Like you can probably reduce its posture and stun it to give you time to think, but you cannot kill it unless you have something it's weak to. or something that damages. In this case, everything else except physical damage can work. So if we fire, or if we throw our fireball, we can keep using. See, right now it's suffering from burn. So there we go. The status effect applied, and it's taking damage. So yeah, you can kill it with any other damage type that is not physical. And like I said, you can still stun it, and there we go, that should be the final. So, and it even dropped loot for us. How nice. So yeah, that's the slime enemy. Yeah. So you might be looking at the screen and wondering where the enemy is, and it is right there. That treasure chest is actually an enemy. It is a mimic, and if you've played any other FromSoft games, you're probably already familiar with the idea of a mimic. But essentially, they pretend to be treasure, and in a game as hectic and dark as Dark Souls or Elden Ring, for example, you're like, oh, treasure, nice, and you don't think too much about it, and then you find out that the treasure chest is actually an enemy, and it can really fuck up your day. And I really like that feeling from those games, so I wanted to add that to my game. Because if we go to the actually, I'm going to put down my mic now for a demonstration. If we go to the opposite end of, we'll see a treasure chest. We can interact with it. It drops some treasure, good stuff. However, if we cross this guy, he instantly turns into a monster and starts chasing us. So yeah, he's just so he's essentially just a disguised enemy, and they're meant to throw players off the game, because this is going to be an extraction game, and sometimes you might be looking for a treasure chest and find one and not think too quickly or too deeply about it, and you come in contact with a mimic and your run is ruined. It sucks, but I like that feeling the mimics gave in the FromSoft games, and I tried to implement that in my game. So yeah, the mimic. So if you have noticed, every enemy I have shown up to this point has been melee focused, and it's nice to have something else. So this is a ranged enemy, and this is an archer, as you can probably already tell by the sprite. And the whole design philosophy is that they deal damage from afar. So let's give a demonstration here. Put down my mic real quick and let us, so if we, he starts firing us with arrows. They just deal significant damage. I can reflect it back to them, and they can keep firing arrows at me. And when I get close, you notice they try and dodge me. There's a cooldown to it, so you can chase them. Yeah, you can. That was nice. Yeah, so they can essentially, they're always gonna be moving, and they're gonna force you to either fight back with ranged attacks of your own, or chase them down until you are able to catch them and deal damage. So yeah, the archer. For this one, I'm just gonna also read straight from the script, because this is a very unique enemy, and I want to see what I have in my script. Oh, I even put it right there. This is a unique enemy. As I mentioned earlier, I have a damage type system in my combat design, and one of these damage types is holy damage. I thought it would be a great idea to have an enemy that can only be killed by this type of damage. The undead soldier is a result of this. It can be killed by any damage type, but will always resurrect until it is struck with holy damage before it completes the resurrection process. They also block all attacks from the player, forcing the player to break their posture with consistent attacks. this gives the player like a priority enemy, or just an enemy that you have to be very wary of. I wanted the enemies I've shown up until this point are like fairly easy to defeat, but the undead soldier is like very tough. Well, not tough, but difficult. You need holy damage to finish them off eventually, and if you don't have holy damage, you need to go find it, or you can't prepare it essentially if you're trying to hunt this specific monster. So yeah, let's give a demonstration. Mic down. Okay, so like I said, it blocks every attack. So yeah, it's gonna chase us, and it would block our attacks until we can stun them. Now we can also deflect them as per usual. It will keep blocking our attacks. And it will try and resurrect. So it will not die unless I kill it and then fire some holy damage to it. So let's take our holy damage and let's try killing him first. So he's dead, and that finally kills him. So we need holy damage to finish the job, but we can kill them and maybe run away and come back when we're stronger. That is the thought process behind that enemy, and this is also the last enemy I currently have implemented. So there are a total of 7 I have implemented. This is the last one. There's gonna be more. I have a lot more ideas for monsters and enemies to fight in this game. As I've probably mentioned in some other video, I want this to be a sandbox kind of game where there are a bunch of monsters in the dungeon, and you just go in and have fun and try and hunt some monsters and escape with their loot. So yeah, we have so many unique variations of enemies, and hopefully I'm able to create something that is fun for people to play, and it's fun for me to play, because they say make a game you want to play. So we've reached the end of this video. Thank you very much for sticking around. If you made it to the end, I appreciate the effort, because your time is valuable, and in the sea of YouTube videos, I appreciate you stuck to the end on this one. Please leave us like, subscribe, the whole shebang. I'm just gonna self-plug, and also take a look at the game. I have a playable prototype. You can play the game right now on itch. I'll leave a link in the description. You can also join my Discord for updates and all that good stuff. So without wasting any much more of your time, peace.